my dad said. "You've always been our biggest mistake." I stood there, smiled. "That's easy to fix." I walked out without another word and cut them off from the trust account. 30 minutes later, they called me 24 times desperately. They say, "You can't choose your family." I used to repeat that like a mantra, trying to believe it was an excuse. But after what my dad said to me that night, I realized maybe we do have a choice. Not in blood, but in how much power we give them. It was my Uncle Doug's 60th birthday, and for the first time in months, I agreed to show up to a family gathering. Wasn't because I wanted to. It was just that Doug was the only one who ever treated me like I actually belonged. Even when my parents made it clear I was more of an obligation than a child. I figured I'd show up, wish him well, have a drink or two, and leave before anyone noticed. Doug rented out a private room at a golf club outside Charlotte. Lavish, classy, definitely expensive. But that's how Doug did things. Not to impress people, but because he genuinely wanted everyone to have a good time. The rest of my family, though, used events like this as a stage, especially my parents. They showed up acting like they owned the place. My mom, in a brand new dress I knew she couldn't afford, clung to my dad like they were royalty. He gave handshakes like a politician, pausing just long enough for everyone to notice the Rolex I know was charged to a credit card they had no intention of paying off. Lindsay showed up late, as always, hair blown out, face perfectly contoured, sunglasses indoors like she was doing a press tour. Dad stood up when she walked in. My mom gasped like the Pope had arrived. I was already sitting at the corner table sipping my drink. Nobody even noticed. Lindsay made a beeline to the seat between my parents. My mom started talking loudly about some art show Lindsay was supposedly hosting. I didn't interrupt to ask how she could host an event when she still lived with them and didn't have a job. I already knew how that conversation would go. A few weeks earlier, my parents had come to me asking for something. Not help, not in their words. Anyway, they said it was time to expand their investment portfolio and wanted me to authorize a withdrawal from the family trust. Their plan, a vacation house in Scottsdale. I said no. The trust wasn't theirs to play with. It was my grandfather's legacy. And when he passed, I was named the financial steward. It was meant for emergencies, long-term care, or once-in-a-generation needs, not third homes in the desert. They didn't yell. They didn't argue. They just stopped talking to me. 2 weeks of silence, then a sudden invite to Doug's birthday dinner. I accepted out of respect for Doug, not for them. Everyone had finished eating when Doug stood up and made a toast. He was sweet, sentimental, said something about being grateful for family. He raised his glass, and one by one, people started sharing memories. Some were funny, some were kind of boring. Then it got to my dad. He stood slowly with that familiar smugness painted across his face. My mom gave him a proud little nod like she already knew what he was going to say. You know, raising Grace was always a challenge. She's headstrong, distant, too practical for her own good. People chuckled awkwardly. I didn't, but we tried. God knows we tried. Still, some mistakes are too big to fix. And I've come to terms with the fact that Grace has always been ours. There was in front of a room full of relatives like I was a failed recipe or a car that wouldn't start. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood up, grabbed my bag, and looked straight at him. That's easy to fix. And I walked out. No dramatic scene, no yelling, no tears. Outside, I got in my car, opened the trust management app, and revoked their access. No warning, no conversation, just gone. By the time I was halfway home, the calls started one after another. 24 and 30 minutes. I didn't answer a single one. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. I got home, poured a glass of wine, and watched the missed calls multiply. I knew exactly why they were calling. Not because they regretted what they said, not because they were sorry, but because the money was gone, and now they'd have to face the rest of the family without a shield. Tomorrow, they tried to make it right. Not because they cared about me, but because they couldn't afford not to. But they had no idea who they were messing with. This time I wasn't backing down. The next morning started quiet. Too quiet. I knew it wouldn't last. I woke up around 8, made coffee, sat on my porch, and waited. Not for them to call. I'd already blocked their numbers, but for the fallout. Because if there's one thing my parents hate more than being denied money, it's being embarrassed. And I just embarrassed them in front of half the extended family. Around 9:15, my cousin Melissa texted me. What the hell happened last night? Your dad is freaking out. Then another one from Aunt Jackie. You didn't deserve that. Everyone is on your side, by the way. It didn't take long to piece together what went down after I left. Doug had apparently paused the dinner after I walked out, asked what was going on, and my dad brushed it off like it was just a joke that didn't land. My mom tried to change the subject, but nobody was buying it. Then 10 minutes later, right in the middle of dessert, they both got hit with the email. Your administrator access to the G. Whitmore Family Trust has been revoked. According to Melissa, my mom's face turned white. My dad stepped out with his phone, tried calling me over and over, and when nothing worked, he came back inside and pretended everything was fine. Duck wasn't fooled. Neither was anyone else. By lunchtime, they'd managed to make some weak excuse about me being unwell and overreacting, but word was already spreading. My parents had always presented themselves as the financial backbone of the family, successful, generous, responsible. Now, the cracks were showing. Around 1 p.m., my sister texted me, "Are you serious right now? You're going to ruin everything over one dinner." I didn't respond because no, this wasn't about one dinner. This was about every time they overlooked me. Every time they dismissed me, used me, treated me like I was nothing more than their backup plan. My parents never once asked me how I was doing. Never once acknowledged that I was the one who kept things running, paid off their debts quietly, more than once, fixed their mistakes. They'd spent years investing in Lindsay's fantasy career, covering for her screw-ups, while I was expected to be the reliable one in the background. Until I wasn't. By early evening, they tried a different tactic. My mom posted a vague Facebook status. Sometimes your children break your heart, and all you can do is pray they find their way back. It had a crying emoji. The comments were a mix of fake concern and veiled shade. A few relatives replied with hearts, but I knew the game. She was trying to paint herself as the victim before I could even say a word. That night, Doug called. I answered for him. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Grace, I'm proud of you." Then he added, "They've been out of control for a long time. You just did what the rest of us have been too scared to do." We didn't need to say much more than that. But just when I thought it might settle down for a few days, I got a letter in my mailbox the next morning. Handwritten envelope, my dad's handwriting. Inside was a single-page letter. No apology, no explanation, just one line. "We expect you to fix this immediately. You're being unreasonable." That was the moment I knew. They didn't just want access to the trust. They believed they were entitled to it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a declaration. So, I wrote one of my own. I drafted a legal notice, signed it, and sent it via my lawyer that afternoon. Effective immediately, they were to have zero access to funds, records, or communication regarding the trust. Any attempt to interfere would be documented. I thought maybe that would slow them down. But instead, it lit a fire because they didn't just want money anymore. They wanted control. And if they couldn't buy me, they'd try to break me. They were just getting started. But so was I. By day 3, the mask had completely slipped. They weren't even trying to pretend anymore. Lindsay called from a new number, left a voicemail I didn't bother listening to. A few hours later, I noticed someone had tried and failed to access the trust account online. I got the alert immediately. Wrong password attempts. Blocked IP twice. They were grasping now. I guess it never occurred to them that I might actually follow through, that I wouldn't crack under pressure or guilt or the family's manufactured outrage. But the outrage wasn't going the way they expected. Doug wasn't staying quiet. Neither was Melissa. Turns out when you humiliate your own daughter in front of people who've known her since birth, and then try to lie your way out of it, people talk. And the more they talked, the more stories came out. Melissa called me that evening. She said Lindsay had gone off at brunch with a few cousins, screaming that I had sabotaged the family and that I was jealous. She apparently claimed I had always resented her because she was loved more. No one responded. They just let her spiral. The next day, I got a text from Aunt Jackie. "Your mom said at church this morning that you're going through a mental breakdown. Thought you should know." So that was the angle now. They couldn't reach me, couldn't control the money. So they started smearing me, gaslight me into being the villain, twist the story so people would see them as victims. Except this time no one was buying it. Doug stepped in again. He sent a message to the extended family group chat. One I'd muted years ago, saying my dad's toast was unacceptable, that the trust fund decision was within my full legal rights, and that any gossip or manipulation would be met with facts. He said, and I quote, "Grace has done more for this family than most of us even realize." And he didn't stop there. Doug showed up at my parents' house that evening, not to smooth things over, to call them out. Melissa told me later how it went. He walked in, handed them a printed copy of my dad's "You've always been our biggest mistake" quote. The one half the room had heard, and the other half now knew word for word, and said, "Fix it publicly, or you're done." My parents tried to backpedal, claimed it was a joke, said I was too sensitive. Doug didn't even stay for coffee. Later that night, I got a long email from my mother. No apology, no ownership, just paragraphs about their sacrifices for me, how hard parenting is, and how disappointed they were that I didn't come to them directly. She asked me to unfreeze the emergency medical funds because Dad had chest pains from the stress. I forwarded it to my lawyer and went to bed. The next morning, chaos hit. Mom posted a long, dramatic Facebook message claiming they'd suffered enough and their daughter's betrayal left them financially ruined. It was vague, meant to get sympathy, but it backfired. Comments were brutal. Aunt Jackie said, "Don't insult your daughter publicly and expect her to fund you." Melissa wrote, "We saw it all. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was cruel." Even old contacts chimed in, calling out the manipulation and saying they were proud of me for cutting ties. Lindsay went silent. The tide had turned. It wasn't about money anymore. It was control, legacy, power, and they were losing it. That week, I filed paperwork to fully lock the trust. No more access, no backdoors. I could feel them unraveling. I thought blocking the trust and surviving their tantrums was the worst. I was wrong. By week's end, they got creative. Saturday morning, a knock at my door in the gated neighborhood. I opened it expecting Melissa or Jackie, but it was Lindsay. Alone, no makeup, puffy eyes, hair back. She looked real for once. I let her in. She stood and said quietly things were worse than I thought. Parents were deep in debt, second mortgages, loans, defaults. Their shady consultant had drained them and vanished. They'd started selling the main house quietly, but no buyers. My name was still on the deed, Grandpa's safety clause. They never told me. They couldn't sell without me. She wanted me to sign. If not, they'd fake it. They had the document ready. Lindsay convinced them she'd talk me into it. I asked why she was telling me. She said she didn't want to go down with them. Mom talked of moving in with her sister. Dad was drinking daily. Then, they treated you like crap. I knew and let it happen. I warned. If they forge it, I'll press charges and take her down too. She nodded and left. Next morning, Doug called. Dad showed up at 7 a.m., uninvited, blaming me for destroying the family. Doug said it was self-inflicted. Tell her you're sorry. Dad stormed out. That night, an anonymous email with forged docs, my fake signature. Metadata from parents' IP. A leak, probably Lindsay. I forwarded to my attorney. We filed a fraud warning and affidavit. Sale frozen. Any move is criminal. Lindsay texted, "You'll regret this. You destroyed our parents." I thought, they did it themselves. I just left the wreckage. Trust sealed, house frozen, forgery reported. No charges yet, but option open. I wanted them to feel powerless. Next week, new tactic. Grocery store parking lot. 60s woman asks if I'm Grace Whitmore. From Mom's church group. Mom missed me, wanted to talk. Said it was a financial misunderstanding. I laughed, said no thanks. Mom was playing victim everywhere, painting me as the cold daughter. Their desperation exposed them. Silence was my fight. That weekend, Doug's casual dinner, just close relatives. His text, "Trust me, come." Melissa grinned at the door. Everyone seated. At the far end, my parents. Dad looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. That my mom faked a smile like everything was fine. Doug stood, made me sit, and said, "We're finishing what they started." He played a recording of Dad's toast. "You've always been our biggest mistake." He demanded they apologize without excuses. They didn't move. "Or leave forever," Doug said. Dad muttered, "We're sorry." Doug ordered, "On your knees." They knelt, shaking, and said, "We're sorry, Grace." I nodded but felt empty. They weren't truly sorry. Later, Melissa asked how I felt. I forgave for show, so everyone could feel it ended. But I'd never forget or forgive. Flowers arrived next morning. I left them to rot on the steps. Doug called, proud I'd broken the cycle. I didn't argue. I wouldn't forgive. It was years of being their scapegoat. Relatives went silent. Neutrals reached out. I ignored them. Then, an email showed $30,000 stolen from an old account via my card. Dad had lied. I sent it to my lawyer. Fraud, theft possible. I restructured the trust, scholarships for foster kids, single moms, not family. Lindsay's voicemail. They're broke, scared. I deleted it, changed my number, cut all ties. Revenge? Silence. I took back my love, money, loyalty, and gave it to those who needed it. They called me a mistake. I corrected it.